you geeks! Amazon released its synopsis for its Middle-earth television show last week. To sum up, the show will take viewers back to an era in which great powers were forged, kingdoms rose to glory and fell in ruin, unlikely heroes were tested, hope hung by the finest of threads, and the greatest villain that ever flowed from Tolkien's pen threatened to cover all the world in darkness. In full, Amazon has confirmed that the show will occur in the Second Age of Middle-earth. I am so excited about new Tolkien content that I'm mixing up my media to give a refresher on what the heck happened during the Second Age, because apparently not everyone walks around with encyclopedic knowledge of Middle-earth lore, or a willingness to pull out the source material for research.
Consult the Book of Armaments.
Armaments, Chapter 2, verses 9 to 21.
Weird. Drawing from the synopsis, I will briefly go over what we know of men, elves, and dwarves during the Second Age. Of dwarves. I'll start with the dwarves of whom Tolkien wrote least. The synopsis promises the show will feature the darkest depths of the Misty Mountains. That clearly refers to Moria. In year 40 of the Second Age, dwarves began to settle Moria in earnest. Mithril is discovered in Moria during this age.
Mithril, as light as a feather and as hard as dragon scales.
The dwarves have good relations with the elves of Eregion. They call them friends.
What's the Elvish word for friend?
Melon.
This does not last long in Middle-earth reckoning, only until 1697 of the Second Age. During the war between Sauron and the elves, the gates of Moria are closed. Tolkien does not mention them again, though when he tells of the Rings of Power in the Silmarillion, he mentions that the dwarves took the Seven Rings to their doom.
The dwarves delved too greedily and too deep.
And all the great dwarven hordes fell to dragons, or in the case of Moria, a Balrog. Of elves. We know that part of the show will occur in the majestic forests of the elf capital of Lindon. According to Appendix B, the High Elves dwelt in Lindon, west of the arid Luin, before the building of Barad-dûr. It's mostly depicted as a nation of ports, such as the Grey Havens. Gil-galad, the last king of the Noldor, dwelt north of the Lune. Gil-galad was an elven king, of him the harpers sadly sing, the last whose realm was fair and free between the mountains and the sea. The Noldor were the elves who royally messed up the First Age. South of the Lune dwelt Celeborn, who is this guy.
Tell me, where is Gandalf? For I much desire to speak with him.
Of course, Galadriel and Elrond hold their own strongholds amongst the Noldor. The Noldor also founded Eregion, the land of Holly, and land of legendary blacksmiths. They were very friendly and had good relations with dwarves and even Sauron. Sauron during this time was still a pretty boy, naming himself Lord of Gifts, Anatar. He set out first to seduce the elves. It is during the first part of the Second Age that the rings were forged.
But they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made.
Once the elves caught on to what Sauron was up to, they waged war with him from 1693 to 1700 of the Second Age. During the war, Sauron overruns Eriador and Eregion falls, putting an end to the great metalworks. He also doled out the rings to men and dwarves. Appendix B and the Silmarillion disagree if the elves distinctly won the war or if it waged until the great men of the West, the Númenóreans, intervened, taking Sauron as hostage.
Bilbo.
Of men. We know the show will feature the breathtaking island kingdom of Númenor. While I was searching for news of the synopsis, I came across this quote from entertainment.ie. For you non-Tolkien devotees out there, Númenor is where Aragorn comes from, So don't be at all surprised if those rumors of a young Aragorn turn out to be true. And that was when I decided to make this video. Numenor is the island nation given to humans by the Valar for their service in the War of Wrath against Morgoth at the end of the First Age. 'Cause we're going to the Promised Land. It is swallowed by the ocean near the end of the Second Age. Spoiler? Aragorn's ancestors fled from the island to the mainland, founding the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor. Numenorians were granted long life, but not that long. As for the rumors of young Aragorn, maybe the show is actually Elrond telling Aragorn the history of his house.
When I was your age, television was called books.
In this case, the book would be called Akallabeth, The Downfall of Numenor, and only spanning about 40 pages in the back of the Silmarillion. Before Numenor fell, it was glorious, thriving under the Valar and within sight of Tol Eressëa, the easternmost isle of the Undying Lands. Apparently the Valar meant it as a gift, but they gave that gift with one strict rule: the ban of the Valar. Humans could not sail west out of sight of the coasts of Numenor. Yes, telling men what they cannot do always goes over so well.
Don't touch the book. Nemo!
He touched the butt.
As the years went on, the kings of Numenor began to resent this rule and their mortality. The Valar did send messengers at first to console the kings, saying, "The doom of the world, one alone can change who made it." This grammatically questionable revelation divided the Numenorians into two factions: the king's men who wanted to change the doom, though they could not, and the faithful who accepted their fate. The faithful managed to get one last sympathetic king on the throne, Tar-Palantir, but his reign was relatively brief and he was succeeded by his daughter Miriel. Her reign was incredibly brief due to her cousin Pharazôn taking her to wife against her will, doing evil, and when they were wedded, he seized the scepter into his own hand. And after that, things got bad. Pharazôn is the genius who took Sauron hostage. He arrayed a massive army to march on Sauron's gates, demanding that Sauron swear fealty to him. Sauron did and became the king's counselor.
Everything will be fine.
Seizing power, Sauron uprooted the original White Tree of Numenor, but an offshoot was saved by Isildur, the guy known for having two sons of some renown. At this time, Isildur, his sons, and his father, Amandil, were the leading family of the faithful faction. Once Sauron came to town, they moved to the far side of the island and made plans to flee. This would become necessary as Sauron next set up an altar to Morgoth and began offering members of the faithful as human sacrifice. Lastly, Sauron persuaded Pharazôn to break the ban of the Valar. Hearing this, Amandil attempted to do what Erendil did in the First Age: sail to the Undying Lands to plead for divine intervention. Amandil's fate is unknown, but the eagles do come from the west. They don't say anything, but apparently they looked pretty cool. The eagles are coming! In a notable plot twist for Tolkien, the eagles did not fix everything. Isildur, his sons, and the faithful had time to get aboard their ships and sail east to the vassal states Numenor had fostered, then dominated on the mainland. Meanwhile, Pharazôn rallied his troops and sailed for Tol Eressëa. When his armies made camp on that hallowed land, the land of Aman and Eressëa of the Eldar were taken away and removed beyond the reach of men forever. And Andor, the land of gift, Numenor of kings, Elena of the Star of Erendil, was utterly destroyed. This destruction struck Sauron sitting on his throne in Numenor, casting his attractive form into the void. Yet his spirit arose out of the deep, and passed as a shadow and a black wind over the sea. There he took up again his great ring in Barad-dûr, creating for himself a new guise, an image of malice and hatred made visible. Thus we're brought back to where the Lord of the Rings began, with the last alliance of men and elves. And we all know how that turned out. Or if you don't, you have a trilogy to read, or watch, or both. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you would like to see more. Your patronage is greatly appreciated.